Hello, everybody, and welcome to our latest episode of ScarsTales, a podcast for and by fans of the history of the village of Scarsdale and our surrounding region in Westchester County, New York, just north of New York City. Now, Scarsdale has a long and rich history dating back to before the Revolutionary War. Our goal is to keep the local history alive, to preserve the charm and attraction of our wonderful home. I'm Laurie Rothman, along with my friends and colleagues, Leslie Chang and Jordan Copeland. All three of us are members of the Board of Trustees of the Scarsdale Historical Society. Jordan and Leslie are also village historians. Hi, guys. How are you?
Hi, good to see you.
Great, Leslie.
Likewise.
Leslie, Laurie, hey.
Okay, so today, you guys, we wanted to talk about the history of the Scarsdale Historical Society itself and take a look at the history of Jewish people in Scarsdale. Jordan did a deep dive research project and gave a beautiful presentation, which, by the way, is linked on our website, Scarsdale Historical Society. So make sure you check out that and all the information, our documentaries. It's just rich with content and visuals and all kinds of cool, fascinating stuff. So let's get right into it. The history of the Historical Society. Leslie, I know you did some research on this. It's so cool that our town, our home, puts such priority on the Scarsdale Historical Society.
It did. So I went through the newspaper archives to see when the first mentions came up. And really early in the 1900s, we hear Historical Society in the Scarsdale Inquirer, but it was for the Westchester County Historical Society. And I did see one of the founding members was Mr. Crane from Crane Road in Scarsdale. So Scarsdale's always had a tie to historic research. So I was happy to see that connection. And then you don't see it again as far as a local historical society until the early 70s. There's talk, and apparently one of the factors that started the buzz about needing a historical society was a demolition of a historic home, which was the Swartwout house. Maybe Jordan can help me pronounce this.
Swartwout. The Swartwout house. Frank Swartwout.
So yeah, maybe you can share a little bit about it because it's in Arthur Manor, which is your area of expertise.
Sure. I mean, this is a house said to have preceded the manor of Scarsdale from 1701. So they think it was from the late 1600s. William Barker, who I mentioned in my revolutionary presentation, lived there. He was a town supervisor. But it was taken down in 62. It was right on Post Road. So if not the oldest, one of the oldest. And I almost think of this as like an analogy to New York City. Like if you recall, the old Penn Station beautiful building, was taken down. And once that was gone, people in New York City are like, oh no. And then when they want to take down Grand Central Terminal, then people are motivated. And I guess a similar sort of thing happened in Scarsdale where you see what you lost and now you want to protect what you still have.
Sadly, it became really a hot button. And unfortunately, we lost the house. But the only positive out of it is it started a movement. And even to this day, when you're out talking to people in town, there's those hot button properties that are still hot topics to say, what happened to this house? We love this house. So it was happening back then, too. And like Jordan said, it was kind of part of a larger thing about, urban renewal and reaction to that and saying,
so
wait,
the Scarsdale Historical Society, guys, was really sourced in this preservation of these famous historical homes. It's funny, when I first moved here, I'm originally from Southern California, right, where everything is so much newer. Like if you live in a home that's 30 years old, it's like, what do you mean? That's new construction.
Right,
But
really.
the talk of, oh, George Washington slept here. And I know we're going to get into this in a later episode with the Revolutionary War, with our nation's 50th anniversary of independence. But anyway, not to get off topic, but it's like, just to preserve all of these historical names and what went on, it was really like we have to coalesce into an organization. And the fact that the entire town for so many decades and generations at this point has just been on board with that is really special.
It is. And it's not the case in all towns. So we're very fortunate, Scarsdale, that the movement took on some power in the early 70s. And it really started because there was another house very nearby, that first house that was demolished, which is the Hyatt house today. So Scarsdale Historical Society was tied to that house since the beginning because they really were trying to save that house and got the charter to actually have a Scarsdale Historical Society and have it named on the National Register of Historic Places, which, by the way, was just started in 1966. So we acquired that kind of title on the house as they started the Historical Society, really at the beginning of when those National Register had been started.
So, Leslie, what's happened over the decades then with Cudner Hyatt House?
Yes, so that was really the start of the Historical Society when they went to save the Cudner Hyatt House. And we're so fortunate that they kept this original tenant farmer house from the days of Heathcote when he was the lord of the manor. So that's when it dated back to. However, that was the Cudners. And then when the Hyatts purchased it, it was the mid 1800s. They did build a different structure over the basement, according to the old Scarsdale Enquirers. And that was a mid 1800s structure. So the Historical Society did so much work, and so much of their focus was on building this beautiful museum that covered life in the mid 1800s. And time in the community changed over the decades. The ability to staff the Cudner Hyatt House with volunteers constantly, and even or staff paid employees at some point, really the need changed. I read in 1999 they had written in an article in the New York Times that 5,000 people had visited the Cudner Hyatt House
Wow.
that year. So if you could imagine times changing, it sounds like there was a big push, and people from back in the day remember lots of fundraisers, right? Lots of things. And I feel like a lot of the fundraising effort has shifted nowadays. That we have the luxury of being able to focus on more digitization. The house was sold around 2019, I believe it was the year,
Recently.
right before COVID. And that has allowed us to do a lot more with digitization, preservation, and kind of change gears into more of a virtual operation. The Historical Society made sure that it's now gone into private hands, but we also make sure it's protected with historic covenants to maintain the facade and the historic character of the home. So ultimately, we did preserve the house. It's now a private residence, which really makes more sense for today. And you can see it when you drive down Post Road. It's across from IHM. And today, really, our focus has been more on preserving documents, photos, and memories digitally. Whereas in the 1970s and 80s and 90s, it was about the home preservation. And we're just so fortunate that a lot of those infrastructures were set up. The name of the founder that I found is Edwin DeLima, who was one of the drivers of finding the Scarsdale Historical Society. And he also was part of starting the Board of Architectural Review. And he was part of Scarsdale Friends of the Parks, which was all about maintaining green areas in Scarsdale. And so he actually has a park on Popham Road. If you look right behind the Community Baptist Church, there's DeLima Park. And this man did everything to make sure the historic character was maintained. And sadly, the Historical Society officially was given its charter in 1973. He passed away just a few months later. But it's such a wonderful legacy that he left. And it's so powerful
Absolutely.
to think all of the things that have been maintained thanks to him.
And then we have to mention Ida Newhouse, who was another founding member, and she served as president for 28 years. She led the effort to establish the museum alongside many other dedicated members, and she also spearheaded the educational programs like the colonial fairs, the country stores, and the historic house tours. And we're lucky to have another one of the founding members as a trustee emerita today, Barbara Shea McDonald. She was a longtime Scarsdale Village historian who raised her children in the Underhill House along Post Road.
All right, now, guys, be honest. Like, do you knock on that old Cudner Hyatt House and just be like, "Hey, Hyatt House, can we take a look and see what we've done with the place?"
Maybe we'll hear from the person who lives there now.
Yeah. I mean, I did go inside of it. So I've been inside of it before and after it was renovated by the owner. And before, so, this had been lived in continuously for a very, very long time. And there were some really, really cool parts of it. And there were some things like the stairs were like a death trap. Like you wouldn't want to have kids around it. And I was in it after it was renovated and it was beautiful. They did a really, really nice job and it looked
Oh,
really,
that's great
really
to
nice.
hear.
So yeah, I thought it was a great place. I had a friend who looked at it, thought about buying it. It was really nice.
It's very cool. I think there is a registry somewhere of all of the historical houses. I know there's another home on the property of Westchester Reformed Temple, right? There are many, many, many homes
We have an
that date
article
back.
on it. If you look under articles on our website, it's
Yes.
called Heritage Homes of Scarsdale. And the funny thing is, I'm constantly finding other historic homes that are in town now that everything's digitized online. Sometimes you'll find a mention of a house that a lot of the structure's still there, but it just was kind of lost in the shuffle. It was built over, but the original structure might still be there. So the information is always coming in. It's always changing every day. We find new things.
I mean, we really do live in such a historical treasure of a town. I had a knock on my door one afternoon from a man who grew up in my home.
Yeah.
and just shared the most wonderful memories of growing up here. And I mean, there's nothing to take the place, but I mean, it's my home, so it's very special. But, for him growing up and his memories, it's like the karma. It was just a really wonderful thing to have him come back and share, his impressions and his childhood memories of growing up, in this space. And yeah, no, I really feel so fortunate
That's
for all
when
of us
people do that. I
who are
always say,
here.
send us your photos.
Yes.
Every time I find people who lived here decades ago, and to all of our audience, I say, please send us old photos. That's our favorite
Yes.
thing. My favorite thing is to just get a taste. Things you might not even think are important photos. It might just be a picture of your yard. It might be a picture of your street. We love them because it tells us a lot.
All right. You got it? Everybody, that's your assignment. Send over your pictures. So if I wanted to get the history of my house, how do I do that?
There's a few ways. I mean, one way would be you go down to Village Hall. There's a little computer terminal sitting outside the building department, and you can put your house in there. You can probably get the old plans. It really depends when your house was built, but they have records, I think, certainly back to the 20s that are really pretty good. And you can look at owners. I mean, we could honestly do a whole podcast on this because what Leslie and I wind up doing with everything is triangulating, right? You find the owners, you look in the old newspapers, which are digitized online, you see what those people did, you look for transaction records there and stuff like that. You could also go up to the Westchester County Archives. You could do a deed search there. That tends to be a little bit drier. The newspaper stuff is fun because then you hear about parties people held or organizations they belonged to or car accidents they got into, loose dog, and it gives a little bit of color to the people who lived in your house.
Sometimes a funeral held in your house. Yeah, sometimes, other aspects that you maybe didn't want to know, but it's still information we all should know about our homes.
It's so cool. And, and just as a historical society, and I was so flattered to be invited to join the board along with you guys a year or so ago. And, so we've really grown from protecting these homes and these properties and promoting their history to a deep dive into the school district. We had the documentary and the podcast focusing on the history of the Scarsdale schools and the streets. And I know you did a census report as well, Jordan. And to kind of pat ourselves on the back a little bit here, we're all so honored to be recognized by the Scarsdale Foundation, which is a charitable organization in town that supports scholarships and continuing education. But to be recognized, right, in this way for the Scarsdale Bowl, which, Leslie, I know you did research on the history of this recognition as well.
I did. And it was, once again, I went through the Scarsdale Enquirers to find the earliest mentions. And that first dinner was all men, of course. And they called it the Elder Statesman Dinner. So it was something where it seemed like a bunch of friends who met together and identified one person they wanted to honor. And they did it at Scarsdale Golf Club. And that first year, I always keep telling this story, they almost gave him a leather bag as a memento, which we laugh now because it sounds so clunky and not elegant. But S. Spencer Scott is the person who was apparently at the table and said, how about we do a silver bowl? And that's what has stuck. And here we are all these years later. That was in the early 1950s. And so I believe this year's bowl for Terry Simon is the 87th or something in the 80s range that they've been giving this bowl out.
I feel like 43 is the first, but maybe
I'm
I'm
43.
wrong.
Thank you, Jordan.
Yeah.
I know I'm scrolling through early, then that makes it even longer.
That's crazy. So can I just wait? We have to share the story of when we found out that the Scarsdale Historical Society was receiving the honor this year. And it was this freezing night, right, Jordan? It was almost raining and everyone, and went, well, we'd love a picture for the paper. If anyone can make it, the whole board showed up. We have some pictures to share with you.
I think I sent out the email, guys, we have an announcement to make. Who can meet at the library tonight? And then, yes, it was freezing cold. And then I stood by the door filming everyone, which everyone just loves. I had the camera in people's faces as they walked in because I thought it was so touching that one after the next, everyone showed up on a random Tuesday or whatever it was. And that's also the Scarsdale Foundation. The bowl committee came. And that's what all that photo shoot was about. We have that photo shoot of us standing in front of a poster.
And to connect it back, not that this was intended, but the picture was taken in the Scott room of the library, named after Spencer Scott.
Full circle.
It's kind of crazy when you think Scott room. So he was one of the people behind the fundraising for our library on Olmsted Road as it stands today,
which has its own history and had this beautiful evolution. And just to, Leslie, you did another social media reel, right? Just kind of showing the evolution of the library and how there used to be like a coffee machine, a do-it-yourself coffee machine that was a total cluster for people, but humorous nonetheless.
And I know even with the renovations of the library, they worked so hard to keep the original stone structure in place. The
Uh-huh.
additions that have been done are really built around the stone, and the stone is still a key part of the architecture. So it's
Yeah,
an
it's
add.
beautiful. It's another point of pride. And Jordan, I want to get into your presentation because I have to say, I watched the video. You did a presentation of the history of Jewish people in Scarsdale. It was so warmly received. Everybody in that audience, I think they all wanted to adopt you. They were so proud of you and the work that you've done. So please share with us. Let's just start with, when you researched this project, Jewish people in Scarsdale, what stayed with you personally?
So a lot of it is it was a difficult sort of narrative to create because like, what is it to belong in a neighborhood? Like there's so much facets of belonging or not belonging. And we want everybody to completely belong. So, I struggled with that. I mean, honestly, just from the beginning, the definition of what a Jewish person is. Do you need to be religious? Like, is it just based on your parentage? Is it a people? Is it a religion? And I don't know that I necessarily needed to define it, but we have got a wide range of Jewish people in town, from modern Orthodox down to atheist or Buddhist Jewish, and somehow everybody's sort of all in the same hopper together. So I mean, just about belonging, because it's wild. They would say, when I would talk to people that I was doing this project, people would say things like, Scarsdale was so anti-Semitic back in the day. And I'm like, well, I'm not sure how Jews grew to be half the population if it was so anti-Semitic. And the other analogy is like saying, well, Scarsdale used to be so misogynistic. Did you know that women didn't used to be able to get credit cards in Scarsdale? Like, well, that's not Scarsdale, that's society. Like, you have to look at everything in society and see how it relates to that. So that was an interesting challenge. It was very, very cool, though, to kind of dig into that and give some nuance to it, to not say everything was perfect, but not say everything was terrible, because there's so many different facets in which you belong or don't belong.
What do you guys think was most surprising? Jordan, Leslie, too, if you want to weigh in on what you learned, what really, again, came as a surprise or something unexpected.
Yeah, what do you think, Leslie?
Oh my gosh. There were so many key pieces. It's interesting to see the timeline because we kept thinking maybe a lot of Jewish people came in after World War II. And so I always found it interesting to see how early some of the Jewish folks were here and so successful and buying large estates and large homes. There were a lot of people here. And also, when I would look through the yearbooks, it seemed like a lot of those families all had children in the schools way back when. So Jordan traced the population and maybe how they were accepted in society or how they stood in society at that time, whether it was full belonging or they were the neighbors or they were just kind of the people you didn't know that well next door. People were kind of in their silos in town.
I think I would say what fascinates me and what I was just really touched by is how it wasn't just how the Jewish people assimilated and came to Scarsdale, but how all the other people from different religions and backgrounds just kind of coalesced and said, there's a story of the Scarsdale Golf Club, right? Somebody wanted to bring a non or a Jewish date. Help me with the story. I don't want to
Not
botch
even
it.
Jewish. He was just Michael Hernstadt. He was a young man with a Jewish father, but was never considered Jewish, not raised Jewish, and was baptized as an Episcopalian.
But tell the whole story. Go
Sure,
on.
sure. So
Yeah.
there was a young woman, Pamela Nottage. There was a debutante ball at Scarsdale Golf Club in the early 60s. She invites him as her date, and the organizers say, you can't because he's Jewish. So she says, forget it. We're going skiing instead. Word gets back to the rector, Reverend Kempsel of St. James the Less, and he goes ballistic. He issues this very angry sermon condemning the decision, and then goes public with it. So it hits Life magazine, Time magazine, New York Times, and it becomes a real embarrassment to Scarsdale, but it also became a generator of change, because now people have to look at something, because nobody was complaining about it before. And when, actually, what I would say, actually Jewish people were excluded, it was just kind of like, that's the way it is. And all of a sudden you've got this strange test case and everybody's looking at this thing, and it doesn't change overnight. I mean, within a month, Scarsdale Golf Club now allowed Jewish guests, at least, which had never been the case for the previous decades. Kind of brings things into relief. And so I guess it's sort of like you have a little bit of pain then you have some change in reaction to the pain. So I would consider it a good thing.
I will say all
100%.
these years later, Scarsdale Golf Club is so diverse and probably one of the most diverse golf clubs.
Yes.
And so maybe that brought on that change.
Right. And the fact that the rector of St. James the Less, and it's just, I just love the coming together story and the story of community, and the fact that it was so controversial. It went to the New York Times and Life magazine, as you said, and it really became like a real controversy that drove change. And it's so inspiring how so many voices took part in that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very cool. Going back to your other question, I got to say that the crazy thing that surprised me, there were two things. One was seeing ads for homes in the 1920s in Yiddish newspapers.
Oh.
That did not make any sense to me because, and before World War II, the Jewish people in Scarsdale coming in were generally German Jews, not Eastern European Jews on the Lower East Side. And that's what those Yiddish papers were. They were written by and for them. Seeing that, I had to spend a lot of time thinking about it, saying, what does this mean? Because I don't think that the ads were successful, but they show something else. They show that there wasn't a gentleman's agreement to exclude Jews. It showed that if you sold to a Jewish person as a real estate agent, you would not be ostracized for that.
So would you say Scarsdale was more open to welcoming Jewish families than some of the other Westchester suburbs, or not so much?
I'd say definitely yes. Well, I would say it's relative. So there were the more urban parts. So Mount Vernon, Portchester, Ossining, Peekskill, places that sort of resembled the Bronx a little bit more, were more open and more open earlier. They had Jewish communities starting in like the 1880s, synagogues, little dense areas. As far as what I would consider sort of like, I hate to use the word elite, but sort of like more aspirational, less urban, like without little urban pockets, Scarsdale was more open than other suburbs that you can compare it to.
How to characterize it today? It's kind of a difficult question to ask. I don't want to dance around it too much because of stereotypes and reputations. But, if you think about the Westchester towns and suburbs, Scarsdale does have a reputation, right, of being a little bit more Jewish than some of our neighbors.
Yeah, I mean,
How does that resonate?
We've got 3 synagogues in town. We've got another 3 probably within a quarter. So I would say if you're Jewish or if you're not Jewish and you want to be around a lot of other Jews, Scarsdale is a logical place to go to. But I think it's less, it's a good question. I don't know how it feels. And it's interesting. Like it's hard to almost without the historical perspective know how it feels, because if you ask this question to a Jewish person in Scarsdale in 1980, they might give a certain answer. And we look back at 1980 and we think a different thing about it. I think the other resonant thing that was going through my mind constantly when I was looking at this was the transformation of Jews coming into Scarsdale in the 20th century is very much akin to the current transformation of Asian people coming into Scarsdale in the 21st century. A lot of the same patterns. For Asian people, both nationally and locally, are the same things as Jews coming in, this sort of model minority thing and cultural differences. And I'm thinking a lot about the different facets of belonging and what takes time and what can be maybe made a little bit faster with some conscious effort, because things change, right? People move in, people move out, or whatever, but there's no reason that there should be unnecessary friction or any feeling of lack of belonging for somebody who comes in.
I thought that was a beautiful way. I thought that was such a beautiful way to end your presentation when you said, as we wrap this up, let's think about how there's always new populations moving into Scarsdale, and let's think about the process that the Jewish people had when they came into Scarsdale, and how it meant to be part of the community and a neighbor, and think about the new populations moving in today, because the same thing can keep happening, right? There's always a new population that takes some time to be accepted. So we all had to be thoughtful about how we accept those people.
And I will say, I mean, being a 20-year resident here in Scarsdale, the tensions, I don't feel them. I know this is a piece that you addressed as well, Jordan. I mean, maybe you can elaborate on that or some of your own impressions, but just as a person, as a resident, as a neighbor, I mean, it's quite lovely to see all of these different populations come in and work together, and the kids all mingle in school together. I, I think it's, I mean, I don't want to sound too like Pollyanna or,
No. But I can also say we talk about the Jewish heritage, and then don't forget there's a church on every corner in downtown. So we do have kind of that heritage of, people that had kind of been here before. And then we have the Jewish populations. And then we also have, like you said, a rich Asian population here as well. If you see my last name, for example.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I would focus in on that word that used tensions, because I don't think of this as tensions, and a lot of the things that happened in the Jewish past were not necessarily tensions. It's like, do you feel like you fully belong? Not that you feel personally attacked, that anybody's trying to exclude you, but if you look around institutions, right? Village board, school board, the forum, nonprofits, things like that, is everybody's voice there? Are other people being included? And, just again, a lot of these things take time. Some of these things have to do literally with how old the residents are, right? So if you have a bunch of, say, 40-year-old residents of a certain ethnicity, they might be more busy with their kids, and they're not ready to serve on boards and councils in that sort of way. So it doesn't mean that anybody should be offended about it. But if, for example, the PTA, and I don't think that this is the case, but if the PTA was completely devoid of an ethnic group that's well represented in town, that would be weird. So it's just, I'm not flagging particular problems. I think you would need to talk to somebody in that group and say, like, how do you feel? Like, do you wish things were otherwise? And somebody may say, hey, it's great. I belong to Scarsdale Golf Club. My wife serves on the school board, et cetera, and it's fine. But I think just sort of be mindful of it. And you might not even be talking about the Asian people who are here now. It might be in another 10 years, it could be Albanian people. We don't know.
Well, look, you opened such an important dialogue and conversation with this research, Jordan, and I encourage everybody to look at the presentation in its entirety. It's on our website, Scarsdale Historical Society. You can also see it on YouTube, along with all of our documentaries. And this is, again, to pat ourselves on the back, why I think the Historical Society is so important, to look back where we came from, where we're headed. It's really cool work, and you guys are terrific. And this has just been a great conversation today. Did I leave anything out before we sign off?
I mean, I'm sure there's tons, but I don't know how long people want to listen for.
Well, we have a couple episodes in the can. We are taping some additional ones, and this is an ongoing project. So again, encourage everybody to just follow our website, Scarsdale Historical Society. Leslie's work on social media is brilliant and so entertaining and quite humorous, actually, as well. And if you're listening to us, I do want to encourage you to check out the website, because we'll have the visual elements, the Scarsdale Bowl, some of the pictures that Jordan used in his presentation. So if you're not able to watch our podcast in a video format, definitely check it out so you can see some of our elements as well. So I guess with that, let's say goodbye, you guys. For Jordan Copeland and Leslie Chang, I'm Laurie Rothman, and we will see you next time on ScarsTales.